I hope you had a good break. Let's dig right in and talk about database structure. When you first created the very first table called owners, you might remember that it had fields and a different structure, if you would. I now want to change the structure a little bit of veterinarian vendors. Maybe I want to add some new fields. So I could right click on it and go into design view. But by the way, I could go under view, go to data sheet view, go to design view. I want to change this, the quantity. Right now it set as long integer and none of these items are here. So let me get rid of that. If you're hearing some nailing, they're building a house next to me, so it's really noisy. My apologies, but I can't wait till they've been doing it all day. Hey, next I want to change the quantity. Quantity right now only accepts long integers. If you look down here, maybe we could have 8 vaccines, but it turns out with some of our orders, we may want, for example, 72.5 pallets or 72.5 pounds of a certain dog food. So I want to change it from an integer. I'm going to click down here and hit this arrow and pick single. What single means is it's not going to be a really long decimal. In fact, I'm going to format it, hit this down arrow, to be something called fix. Fix means how many decimal places do you want? And now I need to tell it how many. So on this third item called decimal places, I'm going to pick 2. So now I'm going to be able to add values that are like 3.58 if that's something that I want to be able to do here. Now that I've set this, I want to be able to update it. See this little arrow right here? I'm going to say update decimal places wherever quantity is used and hit yes. So now it can accept values like this. Now I want to add a new field. I want to put it between veterinarian supply and quantity. So if you're adding a new field between 2 areas, let me click right here on quantity, and I want to move this down. So I'm going to come up here into the design tab in the tools group and click insert rows. Watch what happens to quantity. It moves right down. So the new field that I want to add right here is a product type. Sometimes people aren't sure what kind of product is this. Is it a vaccine? Is it a general supply? What is it? So after product, I'm going to come over here under the data type and teach you about a new data type that we haven't done before. This particular one is going to be called a lookup wizard. And you think, oh, I haven't seen that before. Well, you have. Let's say you're booking a hotel or you're buying something online. Here I am at Marriott, probably the only one at Marriott right now with everything going on in the world. And I come down here and let's say it's asking me what city or state. You know how we get these drop-down boxes. So if I start to type in Lynchburg right here, we get these drop-down. We call this a lookup wizard, saying, do you mean Lynchburg, Virginia, Lynchburg, Tennessee, Lynchburg, Ohio, even a place called Lynchwood in the UK. So how do I create one of these? Well, in Access, I pick the drop down of lookup wizard and it now asks me, okay, what do you want to add? You want to type in the values that you want or look up a field in another table? Well, I'm going to have to type them in and pick this second item because I haven't ever typed the values in yet. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And in this first column, my first item is going to be capital V, capital A, capital C for vaccines. And in the next item here, I'm going to put another item. Let me click right here. I'm going to put capital M and capital C. And the third item that I'm going to put right here is capital S, capital U, capital P for supplies. Usually these are alphabetized unless there's one that's more common than another. For example, if you're putting in high school freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, you probably put freshman first, even though that's not alphabetically correct, just because that's how we usually put it, or seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen. I'm going to go ahead and click next here. It says, hey, what do I want to call this? I want to call this product type. And it's asking me a question that you're going to need to know later. It says, first of all, you're going to limit it to the list. You only want them to pick one of these 3 items, or maybe let them pick something else. I'm not going to limit them to the list right now. And look down here, allow multiple values. What does that mean? Allow multiple values is when you let them pick more than one item. Let's say it asks you ethnicity and your mother is of Asian background and your father is an African American. You'd want to be able to check both of those. So you'd allow multiple values. But in this case, we're not going to let them be both of a supply company and a vaccine company. So I didn't check either one, and I'm going to simply now click Finish. So let me show you one that has one of those multi-valued fields. So I'm going to go, after I close that last vendors, open up appointments in design view. So once again, right click, hit design view. I'm going to click on one of the fields. In this case, I'm going to click on treatment number. Go into the data type, drop down the arrow, and pick lookup wizard. I'm going to type in the values. And if you look at table 3-1, we're going to type in these values, and I'll start the movie over again in a second. Okay, I've typed in T-1 all the way down to T-14. These are going to represent the different service abbreviations. And let me go ahead and click next. And I'm going to say allow multiple values. And what this is going to do, let me do, let's click on finish and yes. Now when I go to view and datasheet view and save it, yes, I can go under treatment numbers and notice I am able to check multiple values here. So now I could, if a patient came and had an appointment, that dog might be neutered and have his vaccines or her vaccines at the exact same time. So now I could select tons of them. Let's close that up. And next, I want to do something called a calculated field. And this was kind of hard in the queries, but it's a little bit easier, I think, when I do it in the structure of the table. So I'm going to reopen the design of veterinarian vendors. And this time, I'm going to add one at the bottom, a new field called total amount. And if you remember from last week, we actually made a query like this, but I've now decided I want it to be permanently a part of this table, so I won't have to, run the query each time. We've never done a calculation as a data type, so under total amount and the data type, let's drop that down and choose calculated, because we're going to do a little math here. And I do like this feeling of this. We won't have to work as hard. We already know that the label or the top of the column is going to be called total amount. In this case, I just need to tell them how I'm going to compute that. What I'm going to do to compute it is double click on quantity, and that just pops up here. Notice it's already got those square brackets. I'm going to now multiply that, putting the star symbol in, by cost. I double clicked on cost. So I don't need the whole total amount colon business because I've already told it that was its name. And now I click OK. And now if I go to run it here, let's go back to view datasheet and say yes to save it. Notice I have this new total amount. It says 50 and 4. And now we have this all set up and it does the math for us. So 50 times 4 is 200, so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and close veterinarian's table. Our next option is to use something called an update query. Let me give you a real life example first so you understand the concept. Many, many years ago in Lynchburg, Virginia, everyone in Virginia actually had the phone area code of 804. But then, I don't know, about 20 years ago, we ran out of numbers. So the capital, Richmond, got to keep 804. And for example, they made Lynchburg 434. And if you're Good or over to Roanoke, you became 540. We had to do something called a mass update. We had to run an update query and change everyone in the Lynchburg area who had 804 before to 434, or we'd have to type in this hundreds of thousands of times. So let me show you how to do an update query in our example in CMF Vets. So I'm going to open this vendors, veterinarian vendors, but I'm actually going to create a query with it. So I'm going to come up and hit the Create tab, run a query like we learned last week. But this particular query, even though it's based on veterinarian vendors, let me double click that. It's not a query where you just select and look up information. Notice this says select where my mouse is circling on the top left in the ribbon. I am actually now going to use something called an update query. This is actually going to make changes to my initial data. And what I'm going to do is, remember just earlier we created this product type. I've decided that almost everything is a vaccine. So I'm going to double click product type. And this changed update to right here when I picked update. And I'm going to update that value to capital V, capital A, capital C. Remember the vaccines? When I run this, this is going to change all of this. So I'm going to click run. And it says, hey, you're going to update all 5 of the vendors. I'm going to say yes. Now that we've changed this, we've got that updated. So now if I come over here, I'm going to close this. And no need to save it because we're not going to do it again. And so we're going to come over here to veterinarian vendors. And notice everybody has the product type of VAC. In real life, they might not all be VAC, but this will give me, that quick run. Especially if you have 1 million records, would you want to type in VAC 1 million times? So it certainly makes it a lot easier. And there are delete queries and append queries that all work well. So. Next, on to one of the most important pieces of Module 3. It's called validation rules. There's an old phrase that's called garbage in, garbage out. If someone types in the wrong value to start with, then the data doesn't make a lot of sense. So a lot of times we set up these validation rules to make sure that we get the correct collection of acceptable values. Let me show you what I mean. The first thing that we're going to do is open up the veterinarian vendors into design view. And let's select the vendor name. Now, we want to make sure that when someone is typing this in, we get new vendors over the next few years, that they don't leave this one blank. I mean, it's super important to know what their name is. For example, if you buy something online, you have to get their name because you can't charge their credit card or their bank account if you don't know their name. So let's look down here. This area at the bottom where my mouse is circling, called the field properties, is indicative of where these validation rules live. And in fact, let's look at this one called required right here. Right now, the vendor name is not required. Does everybody see that word no? Well, that's not a good idea. So let's change it to yes. And that way, it won't let you leave that field when you're entering new items without that. Let's keep on going. Let's now do something called specify a range. Let's click on quantity. And we want to make sure that we don't get any crazy numbers. I heard recently in Lynchburg, someone got like a $2 million electric bill at their apartment, their tiny apartment. Well, there's no way in a 1 month time that you could make $2 million of electrical need and cost for your electric bill. It was an error. So we don't want to ever order the wrong quantity. We don't want to get 1 million vaccines delivered to our little veterinarian office and have no place to store it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come down here to where it says validation rule. We're going to type in greater than 0. We always want to make sure if we order that it's at least greater than 0. Put the word after, I put a space before and after the word and less than or equal to 1,000. Very important here that you don't put a comma in here. This is like a math statement. So we just typed this in. But we usually always associate it with some validation text, and here's why. If we type in a number like -3, we want a little pop-up real quick to say, no, that's not in our range. So let's put a little note here that says must be greater than 0.00 and at most 1,000.00. And this will be the statement that pops up when we make this error. And let me kind of show you what happens here. If I go back to datasheet view and say yes, and yes, it's going to, if I try to type a crazy number in, this was 50. Let's say I type in -12. That's not possible. When I hit enter, it says, no, this has to be greater than 0 and at most 1,000. So let me now put this back to 50 to make more sense of it. Let's go back to design view and let's do one more. Let's do a default value. Let's click on product type. And remember, this is the one that has to be one of those 3 categories. So we're going to make any of the new ones. So let's say we get new products over time. We're going to make the default value down here equal to VAC. What that does is new ones will be VAC. Now we can always change that. It's like at CVCC, we make the default value for what state you live in as Virginia. But if you happen to be a Liberty student and live in a different country or a different state, we could override it. But it saves us that typing. So to have some required items. And while we're here, let me keep on going. The new ones are going to be VAC, but now I'm going to lock it down so that we only get one of those items. We're going to make it VAC, MC, or SUP, if you remember. So to do that, next to validation rule, we're going to put an equal sign, VAC, put a space, put the word or, equals MC, put a space, put or, equals SUP. It has to be one of these 3. And again, we always want the validation text to go with it. So we're going to tell them it must be VAC, comma, MC, comma, or SUP. Let me get my cursor out of there so you can see that. Do you notice it puts the quotes in for me, which makes it pretty nice? So now we can make sure they're saved. I'm going to come up here and hit that save button saying, let me show you this message. It says data integrity rules must have been changed. Is it okay to go back to your existing data and test them with new rules? Is it okay to look through your data to make sure your old data follows the new rules? And always hit yes there. So now we've saved that data validation. And let's take a break. We'll come back and then finish up our last movie in just a moment.